Rob, from the fire and rescue area that we're currently, obviously heavily involved in, what are the main points of contention or, academic areas of research that are dominating your space?
Okay, well at the moment we're still doing a lot on hydration and fluid flow for firefighters. But I will say one thing that is I find very unique and refreshing is the fact that, again, we've got this blend, this trident approach of academia, industry, and the end user. There is a lot of research out identifying primary risks for firefighters, particularly mechanisms of injury, slips, trips, falls, muscle stressing. Restrictions of clothing has been identified as one of the primary causes, but there's never been a merging of the manufacturers of the clothing with the academia that have identified these problems with the end user, the firefighters who are experiencing these problems. So this current research set of programs we've got going is actually looking at that in real time. So we're trialing different uniforms. We're getting the firefighters to actually move with those uniforms, various uniforms, real-time feedback, and we're then giving it back to industry so change can be made to therefore have an impact on the risk of injury in firefighters. Classic example is the work we're currently doing with ADA on the firefighter uniforms. The firefighters have all discussed the tightness around the knees of the clothing, but they've all also said they need that protection around the knees because they spend so much time on their knees when moving and getting into low positions. So as long as we can identify that that is a potential concern, but at the same time understand that it's a requirement to have that amount of padding over the knees, then we can understand what's being done, why it's being done, and at the same time we can then justify why there is restriction or tightness around the knees, and it's not necessarily a bad thing.
So that data is incredibly important that you elicit, and you elicit in a fashion that is ethically boundaried from everyone involved. So the manufacturers, your SME guidance, and your end user, their objective is the same. However, there's a few barriers that get in the way of that process.
Indeed, and I think one of the key things with this trident approach is, so firstly, we need the equipment to trial. But secondly, we also need the end user to wear the equipment. So somebody who actually works in the field and understands it, rather than just a bunch of university students or ad hoc civilians wearing the equipment who don't actually understand what is required day to day of the user. But likewise, we need that interface where we have to make sure, particularly if it's new equipment, that the end user is actually wearing it correctly. So that setup needs to be correct. Otherwise, all the data we collect comes from a flawed benchmark. But from that point on, we then go forward and we collect the data in a way that there is no external interference. And we have to be very careful when working with industry, and we have to set those boundaries right up front, saying, look, this is what whatever we find, we will be ethically bound and academically bound to provide you with what we find without any risk of bias.
I know ADA is very interested in understanding the balance between the comfort, the thermal activity of their clothing, so especially in the fire and rescue area. Does your data present the information that would allow them to successfully hit that sweet spot?
So far the study that we have done has found areas of restriction in the clothing. Conversely, one of the other uniforms that was trialled, again unknown to the actual firefighters, rated higher than the clothing that they were currently wearing. So when we extrapolated out all the data, we found that one of the uniforms that were trialled actually potentially increased their risk of a slip, trip or fall. No more than any other bunker type clothing as was expected. However, one of the other styles of clothing that we found, which was comparable to their normal station wear, actually improved their mobility and movement. Now you've got to remember, everybody focuses on the firefighter and all their bunker gear and going in and fighting the fire, but that's not where most of their injuries occur. Most of their injuries are slips, trips and falls and from muscle stressing, and a lot of that comes from not actually being not conducting fire suppression tasks. So it's movement around the area, lifting and moving gear. So just by looking at that data for ADA, we found that, if we actually don't only think about how it negatively impacts on performance, but how it actually can optimize movement, if we select the right clothing, we can actually reduce injuries from their current state just around the station. So small changes can have huge downstream ramifications, often ramifications that aren't even thought about in that context because they are so far-reaching.